and I'll try to be mindful of the circumstances. Do you guys think you can give me at least 10 minutes? At least 10 minutes? Go for it. 30 minutes, you said? Uh-uh. If you'll just give me 10 minutes of your time, okay? I have a lesson prepared this evening that I want to present. You guys have heard the expression, and you probably can finish it: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I want you to think about that for just a moment. I want you to think about the concept that it conveys. And I want you to ask yourself, is it Bible-based? The answer is no. I think I get the idea that the expression is attempting to convey. However, it is true, it's very true, that words do hurt, right? In fact, in some cases, words hurt even more than sticks and stones, right? Sticks and stones have the ability to break our bones. They heal. But oftentimes, and a lot of times, words, they can stick and linger in a person's mind forever. I mean, words can destroy communities, words can destroy churches, words can destroy nations. I mean, just the use of one inappropriate or misused word, it can destroy everything. So words matter. Words convey ideas. And ideas shape the way we think. And the way we think shapes the way we live. Thus, it's important that we understand the words that we use, and it's important that we understand the concept or the meaning behind words. All of this explains why it matters how we use the word. Man, I had a punchline there and it didn't. Well, it's not going to work. Chaos. I want you to think about the word chaos for a moment, specifically in regard to this topic. Trust and obey God even in a chaotic world. I want you to think about that. Trust and obey God even in a chaotic world. If you were to remove the word chaotic from that topic, the topic would become a little bit easier to discuss. But when you add the word chaotic to the topic, it becomes much more challenging to address the topic. Why is that? Well, because usually, if not all the time, the word chaotic, chaos, it conveys negative thoughts. We don't really think about good things, positive things, when we hear the word chaos or chaotic. When you think about various synonyms that emerge from the mind when we hear the word chaos. We think about disorder. That's probably the biggest one because that's the very meaning of the word chaotic. Disorder. Think about panic, anxiety, stress. All of these thoughts and ideas emerge from the mind when we hear the word chaos. Chaos then simply means things look out of order. And we don't like things out of order. We don't do well when things are out of order. In fact, we respond with panic, stress, anxiety. We become overwhelmed. We doubt. We fear. All kinds of negative emotions, perhaps even sin, stems from chaos. Well, here's a positive perspective from this. God specializes in bringing order out of chaos. Does He not? Think about it. God specializes in bringing order out of chaos. The very first verses of the Bible demonstrate that principle. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Thus, what seemed chaotic, perhaps what seems chaotic to our minds, God brought order. God specializes in bringing order to chaos. This idea is repeated throughout the Scriptures. God brings peace from panic, hope from despair, purpose from suffering, life from death. I believe all of this then provides a strong and valid reason to trust and obey God even in a chaotic world. Because God specializes in bringing order out of chaos. You see, we live in a world that feels increasingly unstable. I mean, social media and all of its outlets remind us of this every single day, just how chaotic things are, right? You hardly ever hear positive things from the news, right? CNN wants you to know how chaotic the Republican Party is, and then Fox News over here wants you to see how chaotic the Democratic Party is. No one's really concerned about genuine truth or ethics or morality. It just seems, let's feed and present bad and pessimistic and chaotic news to everyone, and that will sell. And it does. The world seems to become increasingly unstable, and as Christians, in the midst of the chaos, it's easy to become discouraged, and it's easy to become anxious and distracted. So the question isn't whether we'll live in a chaotic world, because we will. The question is, will we trust and obey God even in the midst of the chaos? All right? I'm going to give you 3 reasons very quickly. Very quickly. I was going to put them on the screen, and maybe I'll find it later. 3 very, very quick reasons why we ought to obey God in a chaotic world. Number 1, trust God's presence, not your circumstances. Trust God's presence, not your circumstances, which often seem chaotic or out of order. I was going to put Isaiah 41:10 on the screen, and if you go there and you read that verse, the context surrounding that verse can be summarized by the use of 2 words: difficult times. No doubt Isaiah was speaking to a people who were experiencing difficult times. They had just experienced foreign invasion by the Assyrians. Their political and spiritual leaders had become corrupt. The nation as a whole had spiritually declined. And on top of that, Isaiah was telling them, hey, guys, Babylon's about to come in and they're going to take you hostage. I mean, circumstances were bad. And if you go and read that verse, you might notice what God did do and what He didn't do. God, during the midst of the chaos to the Israelites, did not promise an easy road. But you know what He did do? He promised His presence. He promised His presence. What's the point? The promise wasn't that life would stop being chaotic. The promise was that God would not leave them alone in it. And you and I often forget such things. Our confidence, friends, isn't based on how things are going. Our confidence is not based on that. Our confidence is based on who God is. Number 2, obey God even when you don't understand, because oftentimes you're not. I mean, let's just be honest. Many times we obey God when we don't understand all of the reasons why we're doing a particular thing that we're doing. I mean, what verse in the Bible says you have to understand everything about everything before you obey God in anything? Right? Oftentimes we think we have to have all of the answers, all of it. 1, 2, 3. We want everything, black and white. 10. All right, got it all figured. Now I'll obey God. No, we obey God even when we don't understand. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6 tells us this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. I mean, that's Solomon speaking there, and he's teaching a very important principle about wisdom. And the principle is this: wisdom begins by trusting God more than ourselves, and oftentimes rather than ourselves. And I think the reason is rather obvious. Our understanding is limited, it's restricted, it has boundaries, it has extents. Well, God's understanding is perfect. So many times obedience comes before understanding. And oftentimes it does and will. Noah, he had never seen it rain, and yet he began the process of building an ark. Abraham had no idea the country to which he was going, but yet he went. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't understand everything that could be understood about what God was saying, But he obeyed God even when he did not fully understand. Don't wait until God's commands make sense before obeying him. And then lastly, stay faithful because God wins. 1 Corinthians 15:58. You know the text. Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. I mean, Paul there, 57 verses prior to that verse, just gave a discourse on the resurrection of Jesus and how his resurrection paves the way for our future resurrection. Thus, that hope in the future victory ought to change the way we live. Oftentimes we think, does it matter? And Paul says, no, it absolutely matters. Here's a challenge. Don't just survive this world, but be steadfast and immovable in it. Think about that. If you need to respond, please come as we stand and sing.